Okay, so we've got an inset stove, and it's set in the wall, and the idea is that the heat comes out of these little gaps all the way around it, and it pushes convected heat into the room. So it warms it a bit more like a radiator. So traditional fires, you just get heat from here. And an inset stove, because it's built into the wall, a lot of the stoves obviously concealed into the wall there, but these gaps here at the top are allowing heat to bring heat into the room. So it's really good at heating up a large space and radiating heat, so it will be really good. So we've set the fire up here with the top-down method. So the top-down method being small logs at the bottom, and then a good couple of stacks of kindling, firelighters here at the top. And the idea being is that as you light the firelighters at the top, they warm the flue up, so that generates a draw. We get the heat into the kindling, and then eventually burns into the logs. And the beauty of it is that with the top-down method, you don't have to keep opening the door to put wood on it constantly. So the principle is, you light the fire, you walk away, put the kettle on, come back half an hour later, and then the bottom logs are burning away. And the idea being is the fact that we don't want to be opening the door too much while the fire's getting warm, because as the flue starts to get hot, it starts to draw, and the draw means that you're getting all that smoke going up the chimney. And until that happens, then the flue isn't quite warm enough, and smoke will always find the path of least resistance. It'll always try and go the easiest place it can. So if the flue is cold air is heavy. So if you open the door, you can sometimes find that smoke will enter the room. We don't want that. It's bad. So by lighting the fire at the top here, the firelighters get warm, they generate heat, the flue starts to get warm, and then it burns down into the tower, and then you can start to put wood on it as it gets warm. But at that point, everything's great. The flue's hot and the stove's getting up to temperature. So it's a much easier way to light a fire, and it means that you don't have to stand over it or wait for anything to happen. So it's like really good if you're busy and you've got stuff to do, which we all have. So just to show you around the stove, so we've got two controls. We've got one on the right and one on the left. So this is classed as a multi-fuel stove, and a multi-fuel stove usually has an ash pan and it has a grate, and the idea being is that the ashes just fall into the ash pan, which you keep emptied. You don't have to do it like religiously. It's just really keep an eye on it and make sure it doesn't get too full. So if you were to say sort of how often do you empty it, weekly, something like that, depending on how much you use the fire. The idea is when you're burning wood, which we'd always recommend trying to burn wood over coal. Coal's dirty, smelly, and it's out of the ground, and it causes sulphur, and it's not good. Even smokeless coal will affect the fire bricks and the flue liners, the life expectancy, because smokeless coal has acids in it. Even though it's a lower amount, it can still reduce the life expectancy of the stove and the flue and all that sort of thing. So we tend to find that because stoves are so much more efficient nowadays, I mean, this is 80% efficient, burning wood or wood-based products, because you can burn any wood briquettes or all those sort of organic products that you can buy nowadays, is much more favourable over burning coal, and it gives you a nicer flame. The stove lasts longer, and when you're burning wood, your ideal is to try and get a little bit of ash in the bottom of the fire to burn your wood on top of. So try and, don't obsess about it, obviously, chill, but try and leave a bit of ash in the bottom of the fire. So when you light the fire next time, you can light it on top of the ash that I've left from today, and so on. And every time you light the fire, it'll burn off a proportion of the ash. If the ash starts to build up and goes through the holes, just shake a bit into the ash pan here and then empty that as you need to. So it's really easy. You'll find your own technique with it, but these are the basic stuff. So we're going to light the fire up now. Now, again, I mean, I've got this posh blowtorchy thing, but you can just use a box of matches. So the controls. So the right hand control is the primary air, and the left hand control is the secondary air. What the heck does that mean? Well, what it means is the right hand control is almost like a boost setting, so that allows more air into the fire to get the fire hot, and the secondary control is the main control, and that's what keeps the glass clean, and that's what gets the fire sort of, that controls the burn rate, if that's the right thing to say. So the right hand control, if you're of a certain age, is a bit like a choke on a car, and the left hand control is your main control, like your accelerator pedal. There you go. I like my analogies. So the firelighters are burning now. We've got both controls fully open. If at this stage it just sort of struggles to go a little bit because of the colder it is, or particularly if you've got like a foggy day, if it's misty or foggy outside, you get something called negative pressure. That means it's a little bit harder to get your fire going. In certain circumstances, if you light it and you just sort of, there's not much going on here, just crack the door a little bit, just so the handle's not open, but just so the door is very slightly ajar, and it'll just give it that bit more air to get it going, okay? And that also means that when you put a log on it later on, if you put something like this on, and the fire's sort of struggling and it's smouldering and there's no flames, crack the door for a couple of minutes and it'll give it a bit more air. And as soon as it's got going, then close the door properly, because we don't like to leave the door open. But by leaving the door just sort of slightly ajar, it won't swing open, but it will allow a bit more air to travel in through the stove and just to give it that bit more oxygen. Okay, but I'm going to close it up now. So as we're doing this, so the control here, both fully open. So once the stove's hot and you've got some real nice heat coming out of it, and particularly once you've started to add your own logs after this is burnt down, you can then turn this one off completely. So the right hand control, which is the primary air, which is in your instructions just there, and that's the primary air. So the primary air, you can close that totally, and then you can literally just use the left hand control to control the fire. And the left hand control is it's called what we call the secondary air. The secondary air allows air past this little bar here, and it comes past the glass, and that is what keeps the glass clean. So my recommendation is you don't ever close that completely. Control it, but you can push it in, but always sort of ease it out a little bit. If you find that it burns too quickly, then it might be a matter of, you've got silver birch here, which is lovely. Silver birch is a really good wood to use when you've not had a stove before, and it sort of gets you off the ground. It's a slow, semi-slow growing wood, and it's native to the UK. So it's quite readily available. It grows quite quickly. But then you've got things like ash that burn a little bit slower because they're a bit more dense. So the more dense the wood, the slower it'll burn. But problem is your stove has to be hot to burn it in the first place. So as you get more of a technique and you get more confident with using your stove, you can kind of come off silver birch and then go on to ash, and your logs will last that little bit longer with a little bit more heat, and you won't be putting as many logs on, okay? But at the moment, we're all good. We've got silver birch, we've got a bit of ash, we've got kindling, we've got the firelighters, which are great, which are going everywhere. So yeah, so we've got our fire that's getting going now. So as you'll see here, the firelighters are burning into the kindling, and the kindling will then burn into the other kindling, and then it's all generating heat as we're going on, and I can feel a little bit of heat coming through the glass right now. I know, it's exciting, isn't it? So just to explain while we're doing this, while we're getting it to temperature, little bit about the inside of the stove and how to keep it clean and the maintenance. So the fire bricks, the cream bricks inside the stove, they're made of something called vermiculite. So vermiculite is a natural product, and it's a volcanic product, and it's designed to insulate the inside of the stove. So it's a little bit like a body warmer on the stove. The idea is that the temperature inside the stove, if it gets hotter, then it'll burn the smoke off. So we don't want smoke going out into the atmosphere. We want to burn the smoke off inside the fire, which will give us more lovely heat in the room and sends less heat up the chimney, and with it less pollution. And that's all about trying to make them more efficient and better for the environment. So these panels inside the stove, they are purely for insulation. So they can, on occasion, pick up the odd crack. They're quite delicate, so don't throw your logs in the stove. You're not log throwing people. You know, you're quite gentle with it. You'll be respectful. But yeah, just place your log in the bottom on the grate, and the fire bricks in the back there, they should last for a few years. But if you do get a bit of a cracking, don't worry about it, because the problem is they're not guaranteed. They're a wear and tear item. Now, If the logs are burning nicely and you've got a nice bright flame, the stove, it'll sort of tell you if it's happy, in the fact that the glass will stay clean and the fire bricks will sort of remain in that sort of creamy colour. If it's not happy and it's burning either damp wood or you're putting too big a logs on, you'll tend to find that you'll have more smouldering logs. You're aiming for flames. That's the ideal. And then once the flames have burnt down and you've got some lovely orange hot embers in the bottom of the fire, that's what we're really going for. Once you've got those nice orange embers, that's when you're ready for another log. As long as you've got embers in the bottom of the fire, you'll always be able to get the fire going a little bit. If it's completely gone out, then you just start from scratch. A couple of bit of kindling, a couple of fire lighters, small logs, and then you're away again. But if you keep an eye on it, and once your fire burns down to the bottom logs and the bottom logs are burnt away but they're still glowing, that's when you put your log on. If you can, try to avoid opening the door too much when there's flames, because when there's bright orange flames like that, which are lovely to look at, they are liable to give you a little bit of smoke in the room if you open the door. Really good tip is when you do open the door to reload it, open the door a crack. You see the fire really roars when you do that. That's when you open the door, bob your log on it and close the door again. So never open it like that. You'll get smoke in the room. So open it a crack, let the fire catch up, and then you're good to go. Okay? But as you say, because it's fitted with a flue liner, it's all correctly connected and everything's great. We know it's working really well. And as you can see, absolutely roaring away like that. It's beautiful. So the fire bricks we've explained. To keep the outside of the stove clean, we just recommend using a microfiber cloth like this. You can buy a clean one. So just literally just wipe it down. If you do get a little bit of a mark on it, or it has a bit of a mark on it, obviously that can all be dealt with on servicing, maintenance, which we can provide for you, and we can give it a bit of a respray. Or wonder wipes, decorators wipes, that sort of thing. They're really good at removing like any residue. You can. I would just avoid using damp cloths, because when you use wet cloths, this is cast iron, and cast iron it can get into the metal, and it can actually cause a little bit of surface rust if you use moisture. So try and keep it as a clean dry cloth, or a damp cloth, very well wrung out, or a wipe, but dry it. Never leave moisture standing on it. Okay, so that's that. The only time you use a little bit of a damp cloth is on the glass. So you will need to keep the glass clean a little bit now and again. Obviously wait till the stove's gone out, because otherwise it can get a little bit spicy. Get a damp cloth, dab it in the ash and wipe it on the glass. And what happens is the ash and the moisture, it creates kind of a paste, and that'll bring any residue off the glass. Unless it's really burnt on, you're doing something wrong. If it's really caked, the glass is really mucky, you're either burning logs that are too big for the stove to burn and it's just creating loads of smoke, or you're burning wet wood. Neither of which will happen because you know what you're doing. But that's the way. And you'll very often find that it'll go a little bit dirty down here, a little bit of a misty sort of a glass, you know, but that'll clean with a damp cloth. Dab in the ash, wipe it on the glass, and then dry it off with a clean cloth. Okay, so as we can see, it's working beautifully. The handle here is, you do get a glove, but the handle is actually air cooled, so you've got a little hole at the top and a hole at the bottom, so it's designed to sort of keep air circulating, which means that it doesn't get as hot, but you do get the glove with it. And obviously for health and safety reasons, we do recommend using it, or at least the end of your jumper. So I'm just going to demonstrate the control. So if I close that down now, this is not normal, but just to explain, and if we close that one down now, you'll start to see that the fire will slow down a little bit and the flames will start to slow down. The thing is, with a modern stove, you'll see the black bars at the back there, they are designed to draw air straight through the back and straight into the glass. Modern stoves, if you were able to close them right down, in the olden days, you could shut a stove down, you could what we call slumber it, and you could run it overnight. It is awful for the environment, and this is kind of why these things got negative press, because they've created smoke, because people that try and burn them overnight, which is terrible to do because you're in bed, you don't need it on. Light it when you need it, not when you don't need it, and enjoy it. But the bars at the back there, that metal bar, you can't, that's an air control that you cannot close down. That's called tertiary air. So no matter what you do with these controls, you're always going to have a certain amount of air running into the fire to just keep it ticking over. So you'll always have flames no matter what you do. So if you are in here in an evening and you do get really hot, this is obviously closed down. Once it's hot, the primary air, up to temperature, shut it. This one here, even if you close that one, you'll still have flames. So you can never sort of, it's almost like an anti-stall device, if you like. You know, you can't put the fire out completely. But if you do find that you close that down and the glass starts to mist up, just open it up a smidge and it'll just keep the glass clean. Because remember, that is what keeps the glass clean. That's called the air wash system. Just on your case, because this is the first time we've lit the fire, the first time you use it, you're liable to get an odour coming off the paint. So the paint, obviously, as you'd expect, is a fireproof paint. It needs to do something called a heat curing. So as you get the fire hot for the first time, all the oils in the stove and the paint, it all has to harden and it all has to dry out. So you can very often find that the first time you have a really hot fire, it might be worthwhile to just crack the window and just let a little bit of air into the room, and maybe you know, maybe do one for a little bit just to clear the air. And then you can enjoy it there. But yeah, it'll just have a little bit of an odour in the room. Not so much with this particular one because there's not a lot of metal in the room, but in most stoves, modern stoves, you get an odour, like a chemical smell, and it can set your smoke alarm off. It won't set your CO detector off, which is obviously positioned up there in the correct designated position. But it can set a smoke alarm off if you've got one, so just be aware of that. Other than that, we're all sorted. Okay?
Amazing.
There we are.